Once again, the doInBackground method is where we'll perform our web service call to obtain data. And in this case, we're going to be using the WeatherBug Web Services getForecast method, which is going to give back a number of days worth of forecasts that you specify. And the parameter that specifies the number of days forecast is actually this highlighted piece. NF, it stands for number of forecasts, and I have it set hard-coded to 7 here, even though we're only displaying 5. So really we should set this to 5, and in fact probably should use our constant that we defined back at the top of the class, number of days, to specify that so it matches up exactly and we don't retrieve additional data that's not necessary. Now I've already gone ahead and put a sample URL into my web browser here, so this is the data that comes back, and I'll come back to look at this in a moment. Let's go back over to the WeatherBug Web API documentation page, and we're actually working with the 7-day forecast part of their API, and here you can see the description of all the different parameters that you can supply, and as they do with any of the other APIs, they show you a sample call and a sample of what gets returned. Now let's take a look at a live sample here, and you can see that we receive back a JavaScript object. Here's the opening curly brace and the closing curly brace of that object. And the object actually contains 2 keys, the forecast list, which is an array of forecast information for whatever number of days you requested. And then separately there's also the temperature units key value pair, indicating that the information is coming back in degrees Fahrenheit in this case. Now all we are concerned with in the example are the elements of the forecast list, so you'll see in our processing that once we start processing our JavaScript object, we'll get the forecast list, then we'll start processing the array of objects and then the individual objects within that array. So coming back over here to our doInBackground method, once again we create a input stream reader that reads data from the stream that's connected to the specified URL, that makes the request to the web service and gets back a stream of data. And once again at line 60 we create a JSON reader to read the character information from that string, and we call the reader's begin object method to start reading the first JSON object, and actually the only JSON object. The one object that's returned contains a bunch of others, to start reading that object. So at line 65 we get the next name from that object, which is the next key for the first key value pair in this case, and assuming it's the string forecast list, which we've put into our strings.xml file, then we begin processing the array that is returned for that key. So if you take a look again at the sample data, forecast list has a value which is an array, and then within that array is our first object that we need to process. So we go into the array, and the first thing we do is skip today's forecast, which is the first object within that array, because we actually only care about the next day and 5 days total forward after that. So we skip the first object in the array. Then we begin reading the next object, and for whatever number of days we're going to read, when we're reading that object we're going to see if there's a next key value pair, and if there is a next key value pair we're going to assign to forecast sub I the result of read daily forecast with the JSON reader as an argument. And basically when we go look at that method in a subsequent video, you'll see that we do our reading of the individual fields within that JSON object and extracting the data so that we can obtain the daily forecast information. And once we're all done, we close our JSON reader, and then the doInBackground method returns, which enables us to call the onPostExecute method in the GUI thread to display the data.